Good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to be a part of the Isaac Newton Institute for Mathematical Sciences convening. I'm really sorry that I am not able to be there. My name is Dr. Nicole Joseph, and I will be sharing, hopefully in 30 minutes, a few things about my research around Black girls. So the title of this presentation is Exploring Black Girlhood and Why That Matters in the Teaching and Learning of Mathematics. So I just want to quickly open up and share that right now we are, particularly in the United States, as many of you probably already know, there's a lot of attack happening on Black girls, minority people in general, with all different types of intersections. But I wanted to basically share with you, these are colleagues of mine. Marlena is actually my graduate student. They wrote a paper called Mathematics Curricula that center Black brilliance and joy, designing principles and a task analysis. And when they wrote this article, there was a journalist that picked this up and published it. And these were some of the things that they wrote about. Study finds math classes causes intellectual trauma to minorities. Because in that paper, they talk about the ways in which Black girls are stereotyped in math classes, things that I'm going to be talking about a little bit more. But I wanted to share this to let you know that these are some of the ways that many people in our society think about Black girlhood, about Blackness, and about Black girls specifically. Um, Lots of racist comments that were a part of the publishing of this web-based article. Um, so, for example, John Smith wrote, look at a Black bell curve and the statistical tables. A big part of the problem is low incidence, intelligence, and loss of their religious grounding. Culture, which I cannot tell if it is a result of low intelligence or not. So, basically invoking intelligence and Black girls not having intelligence. And this is not something new, as I will be sharing as I go along. I want to just say a little bit about my background. I have what the young people say, I have receipts, meaning that I am the person that is qualified to do this work. First of all, I was a math teacher in upper elementary and middle school for a very long time. And those are some of the schools that I taught at. Also, I was an instructional math coach and worked with a lot of math teachers on ways to think about equity and teaching and how do you get more Black students and minoritized students excited about math? What are the issues? And so I've been thinking about this for a long time. After, of course, being in the K-12 space, becoming a professor and a researcher in the mathematics education space. And I've written a lot of journal articles. I've written a few books. This is my latest book with Harvard Ed Press called Making Black Girls Count in Math Education, a Black feminist vision of transformative teaching. So if you have not gotten my book, please get that book. I did my best to make it accessible to a variety of audiences, including teachers and families, as well as researchers. Also, I have a lab. It's called the Jamel Mathematics Education Lab. In that lab, I am training graduate students, PhD students, postdocs, undergraduate students around humanizing research and around critical theories, critical frameworks, critical methodologies as they endeavor to do excellent research. And finally, I have a summer program where I bring middle school Black girls to Vanderbilt. They stay on campus for a few weeks, couple of weeks, excuse me, and they take sciences, math. They also take a class called Critical Consciousness, which is learning about Black girlhood. They do art. So it's a very robust and I would say comprehensive curriculum. The other thing is that they are being taught by Black women who have PhDs. So I'm exposing these young people to what their life could be, possibilities in terms of education. Just want to share that I don't do this work alone. I stand on the backs of many Black women mathematicians, and Dr. Euphemia Haynes was the first Black woman to earn a PhD in mathematics. That wasn't until 1943. She faced a lot of racism and sexism, intersectional subordination, intersectional oppression, and may have gone further had those things not been in place. But I love to just expose and show these different people who have been in my life, inspiring me as a researcher and an educator. If I were there, we would engage in this activity, which is to have you guys turn and talk and share your math stories. I think understanding people's math stories is very important to learning about different challenges as well as different promises, wonderful things that have happened, and helps us to connect. So what I do is I study math identity, and math identity is basically the way that someone feels about who they are in relationship to mathematics. So being a math doer, a learner, all of those different things. And we have learned from research that math identity is shaped by a lot of things, such as interest, a student's interest in mathematics. If they have a stronger interest in math, they have a stronger math identity, recognition, and competence and performance. And those are some of the things that prior research has shown shapes math identity. My work, I have built upon these structures and constructs, and in thinking through a Black girlhood lens, and some of the additional constructs that have become important are things like intrapersonal um, ideas. So that's like beliefs. That's about beliefs about differential treatment from peers. These are the things that I have been learning from Black girls. The other thing that shapes the math identity is belonging. Um, and social historical racism. So these are some of the things that shape a math identity. So why focus on Black girls? I'm going to quickly talk about three things. They are the leading group in the school to prison pipeline here in the United States. They are severely underrepresented in mathematics pathways, and I'm sure that's global. Limited opportunities to learn when math teachers internalize the stereotypes that are associated with Black girls, which I will discuss a little bit. So they're the leading group in suspensions. Here are a few statistics. These are national statistics. This comes from the paper Let Her Learn, Stop School Pushout for Girls of Color. This was published by the National Women's Law Center. So I'm just going to go directly to bullet number 3. In the District of Columbia, where Black girls represent 73% of girls enrolled in school, but 94% of all girls suspended. That's almost 18 times more likely to be suspended than white girls. Okay. So when you have Black girls that are being suspended at these rates, it's quite significant. They're not in school, they're not in classes, they're surely not in math classes because they are being suspended for various behaviors and things like that. Secondly, there's a limited opportunity for Black girls to learn when stereotypes are internalized by teachers. So this was a report, and there have been 2 additional reports from this one since the 2017 report called Girlhood Interrupted, the Erasure of Black Girls' Childhood. So this was a study that was done. It was a sample of 325 people. So it wasn't a very big sample, but this was like the first time research had engaged specifically just everyday Americans wanting to see what do you think about Black girls in comparison to white girls. And um, these were some of the major findings from that study that compared to white girls of the same age, these survey participants perceive that Black girls need less nurturing, Black girls need less protection, Black girls need to be supported less, comforted less, and you get the idea. You can read those findings. And so a concept that came out of this work is called adultification bias. So that's one of the major stereotypical things that Black girls face is this idea of adultification bias, which is a form of racial prejudice where children of minority groups, typically Black kids, are being treated as adults, which is probably why we see the criminalization, the harsh treatment by our education systems, because teachers, educators, administrators, they're looking at Black girls saying, you ought to know better. So while we describe behaviors of young people for other races as like developmental, Black girls do not get that type of clemency. They don't get that type of innocence because we are adultifying them and they are not adults. This is just a graph of that same data, but what you can see here is that it starts at the tender age of 5 years old. And that is just unacceptable. But if you were to look up different reports, you will see that Black girls, little preschool Black girls, are being arrested or being suspended from preschool. It's like ridiculous, but these are the things that are happening to a lot of Black girls. And you can just Google this and you will find multiple um, situations where young Black girls are being suspended from school, preschool, whatever. This Kia Role is one of the most tragic instances. She was arrested when she was like 6 years old. She still was struggling a few years later with that incident, and has had to have a lot of therapy because that had never happened to her before. And they had the nerve to put little zip ties around her arms, around her wrists, because the handcuffs were too big. So you can imagine the way she is feeling demeaned and criminalized and just dehumanized in all the different ways. This is another example where we have a teacher. This is out of New York. There was an instructional assistant in the classroom that recorded basically how this teacher berated this little Black girl who was in first grade and ripped her paper, sent her to the naughty chair when she didn't count correctly. And that is just unacceptable. And it's important to understand that these types of things are starting very early in our K-12 system, which makes it really challenging to get through the system to even become a math major, for example, in the undergraduate space, because there's a lot of issues that are happening in the K-12 space. Finally, severe underrepresentation in math. Just a few statistics. Basically, this is the latest data that I have. That's national data. This is from the longitudinal study that the government does. It has something crazy like um, uh, 23,000 students in the sample, and there were a lot of Black girls in there. I don't have the exact numbers there, but basically you can see that when you compare Black girls to all these different, compare Black girls to their peers in all of these different math classes, you can see that, let's just take calculus, 4.3% in comparison to, 75% and 70% taking these classes. Um, we can continue to look at math degree trends for the associate's degree, the bachelor's degree, and the master's degree, and the doctorate degree. If you look at 2020, a few years ago, these numbers are just, the percentage is the same, less than 1%, basically. This is from the National Science Foundation report that they put out every couple of years or every 3 years or something like that. But you can see doctorate, 10 Black women, I probably know two of them, earned a PhD in mathematics in 2020, in 2020 out of 2,024 doctorates that were awarded that year. I include this because Taylor was a PhD student that graduated from our department. Taylor came with a PhD in mathematics, okay? So Taylor was looking for a space to be able to have these conversations with educators because they weren't able to have them in the math department where they were. So Taylor's paper that they wrote was called Prove Yourself: Exploring Epistemological Values in Mathematics Department, Support and Oppression of Black Women Faculty. So essentially what Taylor did was they interviewed practicing Black women mathematicians across the country. And what they found was that quantification practices really were important in faculty evaluation, but in a lot of ways that disregarded Black women's achievements. Now, we're talking about Black women that earned a PhD in mathematics, okay? Second finding was that notions of proving as a solitary endeavor justify neglecting Black women's faculty development. And so one of the examples that they give is that they were hiring a math faculty member. A Black woman came and did a job talk. Her job talk was about racial profiling and the mathematics connected to that. And I wasn't there, but basically they didn't hire her. And they said when they were interviewing with Taylor, they didn't hire her because her job talk was not about abstract mathematics. So there's a disconnect between what these faculty feel represents real mathematics and what this Black woman mathematician felt she wanted to share in terms of her, mathematical ideas and chops and using mathematics as a tool to understand injustice in the world. And this is happening every day, all day. And I know that there is still probably debates between pure mathematics and applied mathematics, which is ridiculous because I think both areas are needed. But pure mathematics should not be privileged or somehow thought of as the gold standard over applied mathematics. So I wanted to include this paper to show you that even with Black women that make it to get to the top degree, a PhD in mathematics, their intelligence is still questioned. Think about that. So basically, I want to just share that Black girls and Black girlhood is really important to understand so that you can see what does that have to do with math teaching and learning. So where can someone go to learn about Black girlhood? Well, if you're in the K-12 space, these are some of the places. There's a lot of resources and materials. You're not going to learn about Black girlhood from a math education journal. People just aren't publishing it there. Me and maybe a handful of other scholars here in the United States have really taken up this idea of understanding what does it mean to be a Black girl or a Black woman learning mathematics, being in math classrooms, being in spaces where math learning is happening. Another good place is to actually check in and learn from the Black women and the Black girls that you know that are in your classes. And it's important to be transparent about that because you can't just go up to people, Black women, and say, like, hey, so and so and so and so. You have to give them the context. So, I'm learning about some of the things that Black women face in mathematics, some of the things around their intelligence. And I want to understand Black girlhood a little bit more. Are you open to having some conversations with me so that I can learn more about who you are? That's how you have to approach people, Black women in particular, rather than just going up thinking that people are going to strike a conversation. That also helps you to be accountable to your goals of trying to get better at understanding these ideas and staying, I guess, true to some of the commitments of the EDI efforts and the EDI initiatives that the Isaac Newton Institute is trying to have. So real quickly, what do we know about Black girls and learning, and what can we do? First of all, in the United States, we have a math education that just doesn't love Black girls. We have lots of evidence that it is intentionally designed to erase them, just generally, and to dehumanize them. So this is one example of a study by Ray, who basically was trying to understand how does race, class, gender, all of these different identity markers come together to help us understand Black girls in schools. And it's called School as a Hostile Institution: How Black and Immigrant Girls of Color Experience the Classroom. So some of the things that came out of this study was math and science teachers were calling them too loud, too talkative, were policing their what they wore to school, their behaviors. We had teachers and counselors encouraging social majors rather than scientific majors. They were constantly comparing Black girls to white girls, and they were seldom recommending Black girls for gifted programs. All of these things contribute to underrepresentation in the pipeline, contributes to fragmented identities for Black girls, and it contributes to push out in math. This is one example where a teacher was basically comparing this Black girl, Eliza, to Spring. And I'm not going to read this, but I'm going to hold it up for a second and basically just summarize. Essentially, this teacher was saying that Spring, who was the white girl, basically had like this love of reading, this love of math, and approached these subjects in somehow a different way than Eliza. Eliza was at the top of her class. Eliza worked hard, and her teacher just didn't see her as a strong student. And again, these are some of the things that Black girls face. And when teachers like internalize, these sort of stereotypes about Black girls. The second thing is the math education system. So I'm talking about the policies that we have, the discourse, just the culture of math, the community. It is structurally exclusive. For example, tracking, okay? It's oppressive and it upholds gendered anti-Blackness, white supremacy, and whiteness, okay? So pre-service teachers in the K-12 system and higher ed faculty in higher education, they have no structural incentive to engage in this work, to be critical about these issues, right? So professional development in K-12 is basically non-existent. And we have tenure track faculty that are protected. And this is another article, The Road Not Taking Two African-American Girls' Experiences with School Mathematics in Race, Ethnicity, and Education. And there are so many studies, and here I have a few. The third one is, do school counselors exhibit bias in recommending students for advanced coursework? The One of the major findings was that for Black girls, they found that there was significant bias, that they were not recommending Black girls for the gifted program. Part of the reason why they were not is because they were misinterpreting Black girls, asking a lot of questions as, you're not prepared. You don't really understand this math material. So therefore, you can't go to the next one. So that's part of one, just terrible math teaching. Questions should be a part of learning mathematics. But then when you have Black girls asking a bunch of questions, and somehow that being translated and understood as being disruptive or whatever, they don't get recommended for gifted education. The third one here is Black girls seldom have access to high quality math teachers, a liberatory curriculum, transformative instruction. And a lot of the Black girls that I talk to, I mean, they just talk about worksheets. Like, that seems to be the major learning experience for them, not group work, not problem posing, not interesting problems, not, them thinking about problems that they care about. No, it's about worksheets, skills, drills, kills, very boring, low level cognitive demand. And that just does not support good math instruction, period. But there are unique distinctions that happen when we're talking about Black girls, right? Black girl sits at the intersection. Girls in our world don't do math. Like, that's the narrative, right? Black people don't do math. They're not smart in mathematics. So when you have Black girls, they sit at a very vulnerable position, um, of the erasure of their intellect and who they are. So let me continue to move here. This is a framework. So, like, what can we do about it, basically? This is a framework that I developed and published in this journal called Curriculum Inquiry. Essentially, I have put together what I've learned over the last 8, 9 years, about what we can do. So we have ambitious instruction, and this framework is informed by Black girlhood. We have ambitious instruction, we have robust math identities, academic and social integration, and critical consciousness. So these are 4 areas that teachers, families, curriculum developers can think about in trying to get to a place of transformation. So someone might say, oh, isn't this just good teaching? The first one, ambitious math instruction, where Black girls are engaging in argumentation, they're using manipulatives to model mathematical ideas, they're thinking epistemically about their math ideas. That's good instruction. But that's not transformative. When you do something like humanize the math teaching and learning space, where Black girls can bring humor, bring their full set of emotions, their full humanity to the space, that's where you begin to get transformative, okay? Because you're bringing in their ways of knowing, their ways of learning into the space. I've talked to many Black girls that were working on different algebraic problems or whatever math problems, and they are singing about the slope, or they are laughing and cracking jokes with their friends. So they're working, but they're also engaging in the human connection and spirit around socializing. I know that that's one of the ways that I really enjoyed learning, especially in math, right? So those are things that we can consider. And here's where I break it down just a little bit more, these connections to math teaching and learning. So ambitious instruction give Black girls more math, not less. Even in low-level math classes, you can create learning experiences that use ambitious instruction. And just stop using worksheets as the central tool. Okay. So this can increase the cognitive demand. This can increase the rigor. And when we want to think about teaching equitably, understanding the intersectional forms of oppression, like the stereotypes and the things that I've talked about for Black girls, and their consequences, particularly in relationships to the math space, that is where you can begin to make a difference. Math identities is about engaging Black girls. So increase their interest and persistence. Okay. And you can do that by providing opportunities for them to explore math topics and ideas that are interesting to them. Um, that's not just like a part of the textbook, but how do you go outside of the textbook to be more creative, to help Black girls get more interest in math? Social and academic, I've already kind of explained that, but there's been a lot of psychological violence that has happened in math classrooms. Some of you may have even experienced some psychological violence during your math trajectories because we just have this script or this idea that if you are a serious math student, you are quiet, you are focused, you are looking straight, you are sitting in a row, you don't, you can't be colorful. Like we have this script of what that's supposed to look like. And I've learned from Black girls that they need to be affirmed in these spaces in who they are. So it shouldn't be mutually exclusive for Black girls to bring their joy, to bring their natural hair, to bring who they are to a rigorous math learning space and engage in the way in which they like to engage. Finally, making mathematics meaningful. One way to do that is to engage in critical consciousness. Basically, use the mathematics as a tool to help them understand the world. To read and write the world is Eric Gutstein's language. Engaging them in using math to understand things that are important to them. Inequalities. I mean, climate change, like any of our sort of knotty problems that we have in the world, like engaging them in critical consciousness is really super important. Where do we go from here? As I'm thinking about closing, you know, these are things that, people can do. You can start gathering data. Most of you all are in the higher ed space, but I don't know what the numbers look like for you, but you could find out, like, if you do have folks of color, gather that information and see how many people are earning, bachelor's degrees, master's degrees. Black women, how many are earning those things. You might gather some information from those that are. You can do like a focus group if it's just a few. You can bring in, you can partner with maybe other Black women mathematicians to kind of help with gathering that type of data. But you got to be transparent about why you are doing what you are doing. Again, you can't just go in and just say, and just collect the data and you don't bring them into the problem solving process. And so I'm asking for student voice to be elevated if want to engage in some data collection in your different spaces that you are in. And I think hearing their stories and hearing their voices is super powerful. Okay. Just some takeaways. Why are Black girls disproportionately underrepresented? I've talked quickly about pushouts in our systems, our ideologies of what we think about Black girlhood. What do we know about them? that there are racialized and gender stereotypes in the way of their abilities to develop, that gets in the way, excuse me, of their abilities to engage in math, into strong mathematicians, into strong math students. What can we do? You can join me in the Black feminist movement for Black girls in math learning. Like, we can take this global. I know a lot of Black women mathematicians around the world, and we need to come together to really have a campaign of helping Black girls see what is beautiful about mathematics from the, crib to the workforce. And that could be a powerful movement that we all can engage in. Um, Teaching ambitiously, doing these different things will be important. And finally, I want to just close out with this tweet. Dear educators, Black girls are not loud, they want to be heard. Black girls are not seeking attention, they are seeking a connection. Black girls are not aggressive, they know what they want. Black girls are not bossy, they are leaders. Lastly, Black girls are not adults. So this is a way to sort of reframe what society thinks Black girls are and how they engage. And if we pivot and think through a different frame, that will help us begin to see what is beautiful, what is brilliant about Black girls, particularly in mathematics spaces. Thank you so much for listening.